Hello and welcome to Traditional Painting the Digital Way. This is where I use digital painting apps to teach traditional painting techniques. This is part 4 of my Guitar Man portrait series, and in this video we're going to start working on the face and try to refine the eyes. If you want to follow along with traditional materials, check out part 1 in this series where I have a list of all the paint, canvas, and brushes that I use. The app that we're going to be using is Corel Painter 2020 for Windows. And we're going to go ahead and start just trying to get a little bit of a more level of completedness for the face. So what I wanted to do here was go ahead and start working a little bit more on the highlights above his eyelids, and you can use a sort of a lighter pink color, and you can make that with cadmium orange and white if you are using acrylics, or you can use cadmium yellow light with cadmium red and add in a lot of white acrylic gesso. So here I'm just trying to work on the lines that show his eyelids here. And you can use a reddish brown color for this, kind of or a bluish or purple. You want a darker color, but you don't want these lines to be real hard. You want to try to make broken lines and softened edges on these lines. Because as I've mentioned before, the more lines that you make on someone's face, the older it makes them look. So you want to try to soften those lines and those edges on the face. You want to kind of treat this as though you were working with clay, and you want to soften the edges. And I'm working on the eyebrows a little bit here. I just want to add sort of a burnt umber color. Just to darken them, and you're not going to see individual little hairs, you're just kind of going to see the general shape of the brow. And you can add, I will add flecks of gray into it to show the gray hair there. And then here I'm going to go ahead and work on the whites of the eyes. And one of the things that you do with the eyes, you don't make them pure white, because a human's eye is not pure white. They're lighter than their surroundings, but they're not pure white. So one of the things that I like to do when working traditionally is put a drop of flesh color into some white acrylic gesso, and that just gives it that off-white color. And here I've just used kind of an off-white orange color. And then I'm working on the pupils, and of course we're not going to leave the pupils that bright blue or anything, but we're using a sort of a cerulean blue, if you're following along with acrylics, for the base color of his eye. And so I'm using kind of also adding a little bit of some green in there, and just kind of bringing down the edges of the eyelid there, because you're not going to leave the pupils totally round, but I was just trying to get that shape. And then you can go over the top of that round shape there and get the look of the eyelid. So that's what I'm working on there, using kind of a darker brown color. And that also shows the eyelashes and things like that when you use that darker brown color. Now I won't be leaving it that dark, but for making an outline right now, I'm adding that there. And then you can go back with some lighter blue, some ultramarine blue, and white acrylic gesso, and then add some light yellow color there around it to show the highlights for the eyelid, and also on the edges of the nose, just where there's light catching. And the photo reference is working nicely, and you can zoom in really good and be able to see things like that with the Corel Painter photo reference. And I'm just working a little bit on the shadows around the bridge of the nose, adding a sort of yellow ochre colors, if you're following along traditionally, around the eyes. And you want to do that. You don't want your flesh to be all one color, because if you leave it all one color, it's just going to be flat, and you're not going to be able to show the planes and the contours of a person's face. So you have to use different colors, and don't be alarmed if it's not the same pink color that you just used on the end of his nose, because if you're looking at this photo reference, you can see that human flesh is not all one flat color. There's reds, there's blues, there's greens in it, there's yellows, there's purples, there's browns, there's all kinds of different colors. So you definitely don't want this whole thing to be a flat color. So here I'm just kind of smudging all that in. I put down the color and then I smudge it in. And I'm using just add water in Corel Painter for the most part. If I work traditionally, I smudge it with my finger or a Kleenex. I just put down a stroke and I smudge it in. Again, this is about keeping soft edges. You don't want hard edges. You just want to kind of keep working it in. And you don't want to kill all the different colors, especially in the eyelids there, and also in the eyebrows. You want to keep the different hair color, and you want to kind of make it look a little bit fluffy on the edges. So you just work at smudging that in and try to get the shape of his brow line, and that goes far to making a likeness, is trying to get the correct brow line. And so then I'm working a little bit on the nose and making sort of a reflected highlight there, and you can use grays and light blue for that. And then I just wanted to go ahead and work a little bit more on the shape of the pupil and work on your eyes at the same time, because otherwise you might get one eye bigger than the other. So you kind of want to make sure that you work on your eyes at the same time. Some people will do one eye and then get it completely finished and go and doing the other one, and sometimes then your eyes are not the same size. So you definitely want to try to work on the eyes together. And here I'm working again on adding some more gray to his hair. And for gray color in hair, you can use burnt umber and ultramarine blue if you're following along traditionally, and throw in a lot of white acrylic gesso. You can even throw in a little bit of burnt sienna, and those will sort of give you gray colors. And as you can see, I'm still working on the shape of the pupil. I'm trying to get it round. We want it to look round and not, but we don't necessarily have to use a compass just to get it round. And so you can go ahead and just kind of use the white of the eye, and make sure again that you're keeping it off white, because we don't want it we don't want a real big bright looking eye, because that's not realistic to what a human face looks like. And then here I'm adding some highlights, and you make broken lines and smudge them in. And you can use a light pink and also light yellow colors there. I'm refining the edge of his nose, and I'm flipping back between my two photo references, the one that I have overexposed and the one that is more the natural photo, because I want to see more what the skin color is on the original photo. And then when I flip to the overexposed one, that means I want to see more details. And then here I'm just working again on the edge of his cheekbones and on the edge of his chin, and trying to get the highlights here. And I'm not going to leave those as lines. I want those smudged in, but you want to kind of adjust the shape of his chin a little bit, adjust the shape of his cheekbones, get that little line. Now there is a little bit of a line that goes from his nose to his mouth, but you want to make sure that it's softened, because it's mostly shadow. And so you want a soft edge on that, and that's kind of They call that a lost and found edge. A found edge is sort of a sharper edge, and the lost edges are the real smudged, really soft edges. And so that's kind of what you want there. So I'm working a little bit more on his lips. Now his lips are really thin, so you want to go ahead and try to get that and add a little bit of the highlight right above those lips. That helps you make the shape of the lips. And also on the edge of the nostril where highlights will hit, that helps you shape the edge of the nostril. And a little bit of some reflected highlight on the corner of his mouth. And I use kind of an ultramarine blue with white acrylic gesso if I'm using traditional acrylics. Also, the man's mouth is not going to be as bright and as light as a woman's mouth. It's going to be kind of a faded or red, faded or color. Add some oranges, use oranges more flesh tones. You can add a little bit of light orange or pink for the highlight, but a man's mouth is going to be a lot more faded than a woman's mouth. And so here I'm using my little guide to make sure that I have the features correct, and you just have to keep doing that from time to time, because sometimes you just cover things up with paint and then you get things crooked. So definitely keep your little feature guide, and if you've got it on a piece of transparent paper, if you're following along traditionally, then make sure that you keep that there. And also keep it on a separate layer if you're using Corel Painter. And then here I'm just adding some more shadows on his chin, working on the edge of his chin, the little bit of wrinkles that are on the edge of his mouth. You want to show those, but again, don't leave them as a hard line. You want to smudge those out. And then I'm just working a little bit more on the hair, trying to get that. And then you zoom out and you look and you see what it looks like and compare it to your original photo reference. And if you're following along traditionally, you step back from the canvas from time to time and look and see what you've done here. And so I'm adding a little bit more. I see that I want to work on his chin just a little bit more and add a little bit more of a highlight there. And I'm using a lighter pink color, but I'm not using a complete highlight color there, because it's kind of an intermediate color, a medium color. And so you'd use cadmium red light with white acrylic gesso, maybe a touch of cadmium yellow light if you're following along with your acrylics. And you just kind of have to keep stepping back and look at it and look at your photo reference. And one of the things I like to do is make sure that the photo reference that I have is blown up to the same size as the picture on the canvas. And that just makes it easier for you to compare. And then you can just put some tape or something on the canvas so that you can see what they look like and how they compare. And one of the things that I do when painting glasses is I add the glasses last. I don't put them on first, because I'm trying to get the shape of the eyes and the pupils and all those things first before I add the glasses. So glasses usually always come last. And then here I'm just kind of darkening the eyes. You would add more of a grayer color to the color of his eyes, and they're darker around on the edges. And then I'm going to work a little bit more on the pupils and make sure that they're lined up. Make sure that they're not crooked, that they're not out of sorts there. And so you definitely want to do those two at the same time as well. And so then here I'm working a little bit more with some highlight on the edge of the eyelids, smudging that in, not keeping that highlight too harsh. You want to smudge it in. You also want to smudge those shadows in there. And you just want to try to get the corners of the eyes there, and add the different flesh tone colors there, and just keep working on the shadows and the shapes of the eyes. It's just a process that you have to go through. You have to keep building up pockets of dark and light on here. It's kind of like working with clouds even. You have to just keep working with pockets of dark and light and trying to get the shape there, and stepping back and looking and seeing what you need to add. And it's not a fast process. If you want to do a formal portrait, at least for me, it's not a fast process, because you just have to keep working at the details. Keep looking and seeing what you need to add, and go back over it in places and add the shadows again, and then add different flesh tones, and just keep on looking at the cheekbones and seeing how they look. And you can add some burnt sienna colors, a tad of some purple, dioxazine purple. And with the purple, you have to make sure that you make it more of a lighter purple, and that it doesn't look like it's bruised, his face is bruised or anything. You want sort of a lighter reflected highlight type looking with the purple. But purple is a really good shadow color, especially when you mix it with browns, because then that just kind of gives it a more of a reddish color. And you want to throw in some of the burnt umber when you want to darken things. Now you can use black. I used black on the hat. But if you're going to use black on the face, put brown in it. Put something in it. Don't leave it just totally black. See, here you would probably put a little brown in those pupils. And here I'm just making them a little bit bigger, because you need to, they need to be a little bit bigger, and you need to work on them at the same time, so you don't get the one pupil too big, one little. But if you're going to use black, just throw some color into it. Another color, blue, brown, green. Something so that it's not quite so flat looking, because humans aren't that dark. You know, the black on a human shadow is not really black. It's browns and blues and things like that. So you definitely don't want to have a pure black color. You want to put something in it. And then here I just added the highlight on the eyes, and make sure you get those aligned correctly. And also add a tiny touch of orange or something. Just, we don't want a pure white there. And then I'm adding a little bit more of the gray to the eyebrows, just trying to work on the shape of the eyebrows again. And you just keep going over and over again till you kind of get the shape that you want. And it's just kind of a building up process. And I added a little bit of detail to the ear on the right, but it doesn't show a lot of big detail, but there's a little bit, enough to show that his ear's there. And you just have to keep working and building it up. So this is the end of part 4 of Guitar Man series. And in part 4, we're probably going to start working a little bit more on the vest and the hands and some of the other part of the picture. So if you're interested in that, hit the subscribe button. Thanks everybody for watching. Thank you so much for your support. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments down below, and I will catch you later.